energy.
Brian,
Just one thing. So Hunter Biden was also a Yale Law School graduate. So I mean, you can't undermine that. And there's many functioning drug addicts. There's many.
That he didn't do any work.
Well,
he just read an email, signed a contract, and that was his entire role in that whole thing.
Well,
yet he was getting paid the most amount of money. I mean,
we don't know that. We don't know what his role was. We don't
I
know
hate to
exactly.
no, we
say
do know what his role was because we have his emails.
I hate to
you
say
have,
it, but I'm
a few
actually
emails.
going.
You don't have all the emails. Sorry, Karen.
No, it's okay. I interrupted you, but I hate to say it that I actually, to some extent, have to agree with Ian on this because I do think that in sort of the political arena, yeah, I mean, he Hunter Biden probably has some of his own connections and things like that, but ultimately, why would anybody want to do business with him if it is not for the connections? Now, I do think that Biden was indeed not in the White House. He might have been a front runner, but I don't think that that's necessarily an issue at that point. However, he did have a lot of political connections, and I mean, he has been in political power for a very long time. So having that access to his dad and the access that his dad sort of provided to him and he would provide to others, just the influence is there. And that's something that
it goes beyond that,
yeah.
right? I mean, Hunter Biden himself, when he went on Meet the Press, he said that he would not have had any of these opportunities if his last name wasn't Biden. He literally said this on camera.
No, so I agree with both Ian and Catherine on that. I think that not obviously, but likely a big part of the reason he was hired as a consultant or whatever his role was because he has connections, because he has name recognition. It's not something that's foreign to have.
But Brian,
I
just got a question for you. It's not just name recognition. That's something else. But what about the argument that Ian and Catherine have laid out, that basically you've got a scenario where this guy is getting paid significant amount, and just take a dem hat off and just think about it from a logical point of view. Like, this guy is being given significant amounts of money, which ordinarily for consultancy you probably wouldn't get. Do you not think that this is problematic in terms of the type of influence that this organization or CCP want to exert on the American government through these contacts?
So I mean, it's very common for politicians to leave government and consult, be board members of companies, and make millions, make just as much money as.
Which is a problem.
It's all corruption,
I
Brian.
agree. But there's nothing inherently illegal about somebody that's
but it's corrupt.
to
it's unethical.
politician.
It's unethical when you have this
I agree. I think
and they need to be held accountable for this. Right? They need to be held accountable, and the public needs to know about it. Like, we can't just sweep it under the rug and say, well, it happens all the time, therefore
no,
it's okay.
Right, but it's not illegal.
It's not illegal, yeah.
I mean, the problem it's not illegal, but you have to investigate it, and you have to see.
No, but the problem is, I think overall, we have this system in general where a lot of politicians are part of this game, right? Where they leave office and they do these speeches, they get so much money. And how do you correct this? I mean, we talk so much about the problem.
Make it illegal. You hold them accountable.
I think it should be illegal. I think a lot of it
should be illegal as well. Taking the position that because it happens, therefore it's okay.
I mean, I don't want to bring this up, but I do. It's Jared Kushner, $2 billion loan as his father was in office.
I think the guy's corrupt as hell. I think Jared Kushner is just as corrupt as Biden.
It's a systemic issue. It's a systemic issue that
and they all need to be held accountable, right? They all need to be held accountable, not just Hunter Biden, but Jared Kushner as well.
100%. No, but the point
they're not in any way the same. Nothing what you just described about Kushner getting a $2 billion loan or part of a deal is not even close to this.
Exactly, because he was an advisor to the president making policy for Saudi Arabia. Yes, and then he got $2 billion from Saudi. It's totally worse.
Well, Robert, explain why it's different. Explain for us.
So, my understanding is that, and we asked Garrett Ziegler to come on. He'll cite this chapter and verse exactly all the crimes that are implicated and alleged from the laptop itself. But when Joe Biden was vice president, he had the portfolio of Ukraine. So why is he and that's a broad-based portfolio. You've obviously heard him on camera talking about how he leveraged to remove any kind of investigation over there about corruption in Ukraine. He got the prosecutor removed. He bragged about it, right? So that's exactly happening at the same time as Hunter, who's kind of the cash flow manager for the family. He's on the receiving end of $6 million from China Energy Finance Corp and other entities with respect to all kinds of energy, gas deals in Kazakhstan, Ukraine, elsewhere. This is a pay-to-play arrangement that should not be any. This should not happen. It is
no
nothing
evidence
close
of that, though. There's no evidence of that.
Yes,
Robert,
there
have
is.
you seen
Read
the
the laptop
performance of
report.
Affinity Partners?
This
Have
is
you ever
exactly
looked at
why
the performance?
the House
It's
Oversight
absolutely
Committee is
miserable.
taking it up. This James Comer has subpoenaed, and the Biden family, surprise, surprise, is stonewalling. They don't want to send any evidence. There's suspicious activity reports that have been alleged through J.P. Morgan Chase, through Cathay Bank, that are the flows of funds that are evidence of the crime here. It's very nicely laid out in the Biden laptop report that Comer and the House Oversight Committee has. They are pursuing it. Let's let it play out.
So I want to bring back.
I don't think Robert could hear me when I was talking, but
Go ahead.
if you look at Affinity's pitch deck, which has been leaked, there's not a single expert in that company. They have not performed well. Saudi Arabia has actually made pretty smart investments. Like this investment in Affinity Partners, which is Jared Kushner's fund, makes absolutely no sense. So if you're talking about pay to play, there's plenty of speculation that this was also pay to play. Just like there's speculation, Hunter Biden is no energy expert. Plenty places to speculate there too. But you have just as much for Affinity Partners. They're not a great fund. And they typically work with the best funds that are around.
Robert?
Yep. No, I hear. I need to look in the details of the Affinity that you're talking about. But look, that's a separate side arm's length deal where this is there's not the direct line of influence here. That would be to me that would be just a standard third party arm's length arrangement. That if you're alleging that the economics are bad, great, okay, but all kinds of politicians get into stupid deals all the time. But with a Biden family, this is a much more direct control of the family. This is like the mafia making. When you're made by the mafia, you've accepted their money, then you've got influence over them. That's what's being alleged here in the Biden family. Not even close in the what you're talking about with Affinity.
But Robert, shouldn't there be a scenario, and I think we've discussed this, and I think Brian, Ian, and Catherine were talking about this, shouldn't there be a scenario that if you're in office or you're fighting to be in office, as Biden was in that point, or he was thinking about doing it, and you've not left the political sphere, there should be a scenario where you're not basically being financed by foreign governments?
There is that's what they allege that with Manafort, right? And we have the ongoing, ethical rules about taking money from foreign governments. Those again here are, I think, being selectively applied. That's the whole point of this today's space. We think that the justice is supposed to be blind. It's not. It's looking one way when it's a Republican. It's looking the another way when it's a Democrat.
Well, it's whoever has the power at any given time. They sort of make the rules at that time, and I think it's like,
unless they're
how do you make?
they're stupid.
Well, yeah, but how do you make? Here's the thing: how do you we talk so much about the problems, but we don't really come up with rules that would apply to everyone, that would be sort of universal or bipartisan or not, that would be passed to make sure that this isn't something that when you're in office you can look away, and when you're not in office you can pounce. Like this will continue on and on and on forever, and people will argue over it unless the rules are put in place. But when it doesn't, whoever is in power at any given time, I guess it's not in their interest to pass that. So how do you move past that?
Yeah, and like I think we'd all love to see laws put in place that would limit the financial connections that people connected to politicians have. But I think the issue is when are you kind of squashing people's freedoms as Americans? Like why, like where would you draw that line? So Hunter Biden can't make money in another country. Is that fair? What about like Marjorie Taylor Greene's husband or her son? You know, like where do you draw that line, and how do you go about it without actually squashing the rights of Americans?
Well, part of it is you're there to serve, and there is a sacrifice. Now, I mean, they are family members, so it's a little bit different, but still, they kind of sign up in a way. There is a familial kind of sacrifice when it comes to immediate family. And listen, like I was working for a company in China, and I quit that job because I actually felt like maybe that wasn't the right kind of thing to do, and I wasn't in a political power or anything. So, like when you're looking at a politician, somebody who should be serving the people, the interests of the people, I think there is a level of sacrifice. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't then be able to make any money for the rest of their lives, but at the very least, they should stand by. I mean, they're saying that they're serving the U.S., or, if they're representative of, say, Canada, then that's Canada. And at the very least, they should be representing things that align with the values of these and interests of these countries. So there should be some restrictions there. And if these entities have political interests, it's not like, if they're getting offers for companies that completely unrelated to politics, I don't see so much of an issue there. But when they are things that have a conflict of interest, then that's a problem, and for their spouses as well, I think.
Yeah, for spouses, I understand, but like for extended family, for children, I can't see that as being fair. I mean, a son or a father doesn't have.
You know why? And I agree with Catherine. That was my point. That when you're in office, afterwards fine, but whilst you're in office, that's a sacrifice you and your family have to make, and that's the decision you have to make.
Yeah, but
Brian,
I don't control that. If my dad ran for office, I don't control that.
But the thing is, because a good way of gaining control over an individual is through one's children, and actually for a lot of people that have more weaknesses when it comes to their children than themselves. Therefore, and that's the reason why you need to have some kind of policy in place. So this example is Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden would be a good way for the Chinese CCP to control Joe Biden, and so that's an example of why there's a concern. And so
No, I totally understand where you're coming from, but like take an example of say I was going to run for president, and maybe I didn't like my father. Like that would screw him over. He doesn't have any control over the decisions I make. He shouldn't be penalized for decisions I make, and I shouldn't be penalized for decisions that he makes. So I get your point, but I think that it's just tough to sell that.
That's a fair argument you're making, a very logical one. But the point is that then you shouldn't run for president because you are a risk to the country, and to the point where another country can basically take control of your country.
Yeah, unfortunately, not everyone can run. That's why you do assessments before you run for office, and a lot of people kind of bow out at a certain stage because they're too vulnerable, and so they cannot run. And maybe it is unfair. It is absolutely unfair, but it is the situation, I think. So
Why do we hold politicians to such a low standard? When we hold members of the military, people who sign up, to join the Army or the Marines or the Air Force or the Navy, we tell them that they're basically giving up their rights to bodily autonomy, right? They're forced to take the vaccines because there's a vaccine mandate, and if they're in the military, they cannot say no, right? I'm just using that to illustrate a point here. I'm not specifically referring to the vaccines. Why is it that they lose all of their rights when they sign up for the military and to serve as public servants, but politicians are not held to the same standard at all, like ever, right? We're treating them like they're civilians, even though they are public servants. They're being paid by your tax dollars, and yet we don't hold them accountable. We're treating them like they're just anybody else, and yet the decisions that they make change everything. They determine how we live our lives. But we're not holding them to any kind of standard at all. There's no accountability. We're treating them like they're private citizens. They're private individuals who can do whatever the hell they want. Why is it that we're just like going along with this? This has to change.
I mean, they do have rules, and there's a lot of strict rules when you're in government. So I don't think that they're completely unbound by that kind of stuff. There's a lot of sort of oversight and accountability, although people feel like there's certainly not enough. And one of the issues I think that a lot of people will agree with is lobbying. And there is some areas where there is a lack of transparency and opportunity for corruption and things like that. But
I mean, look at Unusual Whales, right? They put out a lot of good information about all these politicians who make bank. People like Pelosi getting fat and rich off of deals like with NVIDIA semiconductors right after passing the CHIPS bill, which she was responsible for. And she buys a bunch of NVIDIA stock before that even happens. I mean, they have access to so much privileged information that anyone else, if anyone else had this kind of information, they would be busted for insider trading. So they have even more privileges than the average business person. Like,
well, that
what
seems illegal. So, Ian, I think that what those actions, anyways, the way they're being described, I think a lot of the stuff that goes on would be potentially illegal. But what happens is they get a free pass potentially because they have a lot of power and people don't want to go against them, maybe because of social structures, maybe because of the power structures that they have. So I think the accountability isn't being applied as it should because of the dynamics within as to, there not being any rules necessarily.
So yeah, you're in agreement with me, right? The de facto aristocracy. They are a de facto aristocracy, and the rest of us are not, right? We are the peasants. It's a feudal system that we're living under, right? The whole world is living under this feudal system where two sets of rules apply. The people in power get to do whatever the fuck they want, and the rest of us, we just have to follow alongside them. And I'm in agreement with you. It's like I'm just appalled by the number of people who will go to crazy lengths, and people like Brian who will defend them. I've noticed he's very quiet about the situation, about what we're talking about right now. Why is it that people go out of their way to defend the very aristocracy that is oppressing us?
I missed part. I missed part of it because I went in the room for a second.
There's a team ignorance here. Hi everyone, this is Jack Labardi. There's a team ignorance that plays in part here. And going back to what you said, term limits it's not a perfect cure, but it would definitely help in the situation. I just want to throw my 2 cents in there because yes, they get embedded. They have too many buddies. I've been in politics for 2.5 years now, and I'll tell you what, I'm disgusted by most of what I've seen.
Yeah, to your point, Ian, a lot of these people, and I trade a lot of times based on what some of these senators are doing. All of it's public info, and so because it's public, they work within the law. Although it's a very fine line, I agree with you. It's a fine line between being legal and being illegal because they know what their decisions are going to be, and then they buy.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and then they buy stock in those companies, knowing what the decision is going to be. But it is public info, so that's how they get through buy it. I think there should be a law against it, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think we agree, Ian. I think we agree on a lot of things in respect to some of the unfair actions that those in power have.
It happens on both sides of the aisle, right? I mean, it's not just Pelosi that we're going after. There's a lot of Republicans as well. I mean, look at Eye Patch McCain, right? He has made a lot of money on the defense industry. Why is that?
I would love to see a stock ban. I'd love to see Congress not be able to trade stocks while they're in Congress. That's one of the things you give up if you're going to be somebody, a politician in the United States.
Yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so let me ask you, Brian, because this is kind of important as I was talking about, a lot of these things being divided down partisan lines here. And I know that we talked a little bit about it. You got lucky. I can't actually search your tweets prior to your reinstatement on Twitter, so you got off on that one. But I do want to ask you a few things about some of them where, you're talking about that how we don't just arrest people in America that we don't like. You said in this case, neither Soros or Bill Gates have broken any laws unless you have evidence that no one else does. your feelings do not trump our legal system. So I want to ask you here, do you believe Trump is a criminal or not?
I need to see the evidence. Based on some of the things I've seen in the Cohen case, some of the evidence I've seen in Fulton County, and the documents case in the federal level, I think that it's a very good chance he is a criminal. And I think you're not a criminal until you're proven to be one. So I can't say he's a criminal. I think there's evidence pointing to the fact that he is a criminal.
Brian, just to add,
Brian,
just to add,
what's your
let me just ask
allegation about
Brian,
Fulton County?
Sorry, Brian, just to add to that, if you can just, do you think that the American judicial system isn't impartial? So what I mean is it fair in all aspects?
I think it's a lot fairer than most countries on the planet. I don't think it's 100% fair. And Fulton County, I don't know who asked that. Was it Robert or?
It was Robert. Yeah. What are you alleging that happened in Fulton County?
So some of the evidence that he told the Secretary of State, I guess it was, that he needs to find the votes. There's another call in where he's trying to set up the electors, the false electors, that I haven't heard.
They're not false electors. They were duly elected Trump electors.
Yeah, I beg to differ on that. I think that the law probably says otherwise. But like
Dude,
I said,
read the law. Do it.
I
Well, it seems that they got cut off automatically. But yeah, thank y'all for joining us. It's been crazy, completely crazy on the Twitter app today. Total meltdown. So yeah, so they're obviously saying that they're going to be arresting Donald J. Trump. He came out with a message saying that they're going to arrest him Tuesday. Have to wait to see. The first arrest will be a shock to the world. Okay, so if you Trump's calling for a protest. By the way, if you're planning on going, stay home. Just stay home. Don't go, because you'll wind up just like Jan 6. Stay home. Have a great weekend. Remember, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your property. Always be prepared.
We fought a revolution to secure your liberty.